Hello everybody, this is Mr. Laubach. In this short video, we are going to go over the French and Indian War, and specifically what the advantages of the French and the advantages of the British were during the war. So let's first talk a little background about the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War lasted from 1754 to 1763. It was also known in Europe mostly as the 7 Years' War. Now you will notice that the dates make it look like it was a 9-year war, which in the Americas it was, as the fighting started in 1754 and lasted about 2 years before the British officially declared war on the French. So after the official declaration of war, the war lasted about 7 years. So what was the cause of the French and Indian War? The overwhelming cause of the war was land, particularly the Ohio River Valley, which you can see here in this map. So we should think of the area in present-day Pittsburgh, where the Monongahela, the Allegheny, and the Ohio River meet, and then also in present-day Ohio and present-day Kentucky, and the northern part of present-day West Virginia. So this area was crucial. Not only was it great for fur trading, but it also had trade significance since the rivers were excellent for transportation and eventually led to the Mississippi, which of course eventually leads down to the Gulf of Mexico, and from there you can go to anywhere in the world basically. So early on in the war, especially the first 2 years, the French got the upper hand, and you'll see why when we go over their advantages. Another key takeaway from the war was that the fighting was brutal, and we'll talk more about that in a few moments. Now, the French and Indian War and the results were a huge turning point in U.S. history. After the French and Indian War, for a variety of reasons, there started to be calls and clamors in the colonies for independence from Britain. Now, the war itself ended with the Treaty of Paris of 1763, and a big impact of this treaty was that France was essentially gone from North America, except for a couple of islands used for fishing off of Canada and a couple of French Caribbean territories. So no longer would the French be in the way of the British colonies as they wanted to expand westward. So first, let's talk about the British advantages. In the colonies, the British had a much larger population. There were approximately 1 million British colonists living in the 13 colonies, as opposed to the French colonists where there were about a total of 60,000 French colonists. The British also at the time had the strongest navy in the world, so they were able to mobilize troops and supplies better than the French. The British also had excellent Native American allies. While most Native American groups sided with the French, the British had most of the Iroquois and the Cherokee tribes. They were excellent warriors and got to know the territory very well. Another advantage for the British in the war was William Pitt. William Pitt ended up taking control of the French and Indian War effort on the side of the British. He spent and borrowed a lot of money on behalf of the war. He envisioned a very large British colonial presence that would go much further than the current existing 13 colonies. He sent over 25,000 redcoats to the Americas for the war effort and paid for colonial armies and helped to encourage colonial militias to prepare for and join the war effort. Without a doubt, William Pitt taking over the war effort on behalf of the British helped change the tide of the war in the favor of the British. Now let's talk about some French advantages. The French had a long-standing great relationship with many of the Native American tribes in the region. The Algonquins, the Ottawas, and the Hurons already had been allies with the French, and they were natural teammates to fight against the British, who they feared would be encroaching on their land. Also, much of the fighting during the French and Indian War was what would be known as guerrilla warfare, ambushes, sneak attacks, and not the traditional warfare that the British redcoats were used to fighting. This made the war particularly brutal. The French and their Native American allies were very familiar with the land, so they had the home field advantage in the Ohio River Valley. Also, the French had more organized leadership, and their government was able to act quickly and more uniformly, reacting to the war situations. So in conclusion, the French and the British each had their significant advantages and weaknesses. As we know, the British ultimately won the French and Indian War and were able to secure claim to the territory from the Atlantic coast all the way to the Mississippi River. And the French were ultimately basically expelled from North America. So I hope this video helps you better understand the strengths and the weaknesses of the British and the French during the French and Indian War. Have a great rest of the day.